Respected teachers and friends, it is said that any man can be a father, but it takes someone special to be dad. I think my dad was a special person. He was born in a middle-class joint family in a small town of Saurashtra, Gujarat. And sparks of his brilliance and character were visible even during his school days in curricular and more so in extracurricular activities. He stood second in Bhavnagar State School in matriculation and then moved to Bombay for further studies. And like all pre-independence bright students, he too wanted to be a barrister. Thank God he didn't become one. The youngsters present here would be surprised to know that he was basically MD General Medicine from KEM to start with before he took up psychiatry. And passing MD in General Medicine with first attempt was unheard of in those days. But he had accomplished that, and that too when most of his seniors thought that he was not spending enough time with the books and hence should not appear for the exam that year. He was very popular as a physician, first in KEM and then in Bombay Hospital. In fact, Senior Birlaji wanted to retain him as a consultant in Bombay Hospital, but destiny had some other plans, and that took him to Maudsley Hospital and Institute of Psychiatry and Northern Hospital in UK for training in psychiatry. On returning to India in 1955, he joined KEM and then other hospitals including Bombay Hospital and nurtured psychiatry and psychiatrists over the next 50 years with sheer hard work and dedication. It's worth appreciating that this uphill task was achieved with selfless efforts and without compromising on ethics and principles. His ability to balance professional, social and family obligations were exceptional. As most of his students would share, that anything under the sun could be discussed during the rounds, and he would compel you to think out of the box. His views were often far ahead of his time and hence resulted in controversies. I'm reminded of this statement made by Dr. K.S. Iyer during West Zone CME, that was in 1992 in Pune, where he was referring to a paper published in 1973 by Dr. Bagadia and his team on psychosomatic studies of 147 cases of diabetes. In 1992, Dr. Iyer said, and I quote, that this paper is 40 years ahead of its time, out of which 20 years have passed, and we have to wait for another 20 years for its acceptance by the medical world. Today in 2015, we know how Dr. Iyer's estimate turned out to be correct. In fact, one of the topics for CME arranged by IMA about a year back was diabetes and mental health, and compare this with 1970 when no journal was ready to accept this paper and physicians were up in arms against this during presentation because they just could not digest the concept and they thought it was all bogus. In fact, at one point even the endocrine department stopped referring patients for the study. It's easy for us to label everything outdated from today's perspective, but we forget that someday somebody had to toil to bring about this change. Psychosomatics was a subject very close to his heart and probably rooted somewhere in his training as an internist and his deep understanding which motivated him to switch to psychiatry. I will not hesitate in saying that he created a platform for the subject in Mumbai and introduced his students and compelled other medical fields to acknowledge. In some of these meetings which I was fortunate to attend, he used to single-handedly take on 6 to 7 medical experts on the panel. They would hate him, but they could not silence him. So much was the influence of these discussions in those days that as a school kid, I used to think that psychiatry is more of psychosomatics than depression and schizophrenia. He was a no-nonsense man with respect to professionalism, and I know in the late 80s there was a surge in brown sugar addiction in Mumbai, and there was a lobby with vested interests trying to cash on with inflated statistics of addicts in Mumbai. As an invited speaker, he would take all these pseudo-activists and block their agenda to label Mumbai city as brown sugar capital. As a good arbitrator, his tact and diplomatic skills came to rescue in IPS, which was on the verge of breakup due to infighting between the groups of North and South India. He not only played a significant role in diffusing the conflict, but also played a pioneering role in creating the zonal branches of IPS, as it was mentioned. Something similar happened in international arena in 1971, when the Cold War was at its peak. And during the WPA committee meeting, there were allegations and suspense about psychiatry being misused by USSR for political purposes. The other side, that is, Americans wanted to censure and cancel the membership of USSR through a resolution. Apparently, it was Dad's opinion during vote that politics should not be brought into world organization without adequate proof. This diffused the situation for that particular year. Of course, the Americans succeeded next year. Now, these are some of the unsung events, and I thought it was important to share them. On family front, his 4 children, that is me and my 3 elder sisters, we were fortunate to have a perfect role model who had immense influence on shaping our life and persona. He was a caring husband for my mother, and jointly they nurtured a family with devotion and commitment. Some of his teachings we would like to emulate were living simple life with contentment and stick to principles and ethics, objectivity and rationality in day-to-day assessment, develop a broad-based personality, develop independent thinking, and don't be a follower. Try and take a stand wherever necessary. Develop a respect for Swadeshi and avoid foreign goods as far as possible. In fact, he was one of the driving forces to support the first Indian pharma which introduced cheaper trifluperazine, which had to compete with the multinational companies having monopoly. His views on gender roles were very realistic and not driven by tradition. However, that is, his children's role in domestic chores were well defined and rotated irrespective of our academic commitments. I became proficient in chopping vegetables in the process. On a personal note, he was very keen that I take up psychiatry, and I suppose I could not think of anything but psychiatry at that age and under such an influence. He retired from KM when I joined PG, and hence I was not as fortunate as some of his students were, even though all my clinical skills were sharpened by observing him in private practice. As the saying goes, it's difficult to grow under a banyan tree. Children of successful and popular individuals have some complexes when they join parents' profession, especially in the same setup. Identity crisis and unavoidable comparisons are part of the process till you get a foothold. For me, additional vulnerability, of course, was my unique surname. I remember as a school kid, I had discussed some topic with Dad, which I was supposed to speak on. After incorporating all his suggestions, I realized that none of my original ideas were retained. After that, or for whatever reason, I decided not to seek his direct help for any creative work for the fear of losing my individuality. A resultant act of this tendency, which I repent now, was my MD thesis, which I did not show him till I passed my MD exam. Basically, I was holding a registrar's post in KM, but due to some university mess up, my MD registration was in Sion Hospital with Dr. Mundra, who himself was a favorite student of Dr. B.N. Bagadia. I was going to meet Dr. Mundra with the written thesis, but I did not show it to Daddy. And Daddy was very upset with this idea that I did not share anything with him. So he made it a point to tell me that you please convey to Dr. Mundra that that means he had no role to play in my preparations. I had no guts to do that, but I think Dr. Mundra realized when he looked at my thesis and he picked up some of the spelling mistakes which only I could make. He was unconventional in many ways. He always used to start his Fiat car in second gear directly because he thought that shifting too many gears was a cognitive burden. So why should you waste time? Car is for my service, I am not for car service. When he got fed up of driving and traffic, he switched over to local trains, totally unmindful of the impression that people had of a top medical consultant at that time. Also in the process, he stopped evening practice. Now can you imagine that all this happened when he was at the peak of his career? In social and public life too, he promoted rational reforms. His views were pragmatic and with a lot of farsightedness. He also worked for upliftment of people from larger community, family and his hometown. There's always an urge to give back to the society without expecting anything in return. He started a trust through which our family is presently pursuing some of his dreams, besides the KM Oration, BPS Lifetime Award and West Zone Endowment. This trust, Dr. V.N. Bagadia Foundation, has a corpus for research with KM Research Society and runs a fortnightly charitable psychiatric OPD in his hometown, along with a lot of other philanthropic activities on an ongoing basis. His excellence in academic, research and professional life flourished in KM, and in turn KM Psychiatry got a reputation on world map which we people from that era still remember. He was very protective and possessive about his students and very proud of his team in WHO Psychopharmacology Center. All these, of course, he sorely missed after his retirement. He was unhappy about psychiatric treatment getting into licensing hurdle because segregation will add to the taboo, whereas the need of the hour is to integrate psychiatry with mainstream medicine for better acceptance. He constantly strived to challenge the stigma linked with the branch and marginalization of the psychiatrist in medical field. He had dreams for BPS, a baby he nurtured with the help of his colleagues. Bombay Psychiatric Society completing 50 years against all odds itself is a tribute to all those founder members. I wish he was here with us to celebrate this day. Thank you BPS for giving this opportunity to go through this emotional journey.